All right, so I wanted to do at least one example for lesson 4-1, which is called patterns. I wanted to do at least one example on a word problem. So let's create a word problem. Let's create a word problem that's maybe similar to something that you would see in a workbook. So let's say this is me, and let's call me Mr. Peterson, Mr. P. All right, so that's me, and let's say you want to rent a car from me, and I have a bunch of cars, and so you want to rent a car from me, and let's draw like a really nice car. Yeah, it's pretty good. Maybe it's like a van, and I don't know, maybe you're a delivery truck driver or something. The details of the example aren't super important, but you want to rent a car for me. So you would like to rent a car from Mr. Peterson. But I'm going to charge you money. How am I going to charge you money? Well, let's say I will charge you a certain amount of money depending on how much you drive it, right? Because if somebody rents this car from me and they just drive it around the block and return it, then that will be, I will probably want to charge them differently than if they take the car and they drive it to Kamloops and back, right? So let's say I'm not charging you based on time, but based on how much you use the car. So how could I quantify that? Let's say he will charge you based on how many kilometers you drive. So charge you, let's say, 50 cents. So I'll draw that in dollars. So he'll charge you 50 cents per kilometer driven. And you say, okay, that's fair. All right, so that's fair. I am going to rent this car, and let's say the question is, what is an equation that relates the cost of the car to kilometers driven. So if this is the question, then we know that our answer will maybe look something like this. Hey, let's actually, before we start writing, let's define some variables here. So we know that we're interested in two quantities. One is the cost of the car. Let's just call that C. Another is kilometers driven. So what could we call that? We could call that D. We could call that D for distance, or D for amount driven. So if we want an equation that relates these two quantities, we know it might look something like this. Now, here we have an equation, and it's relating cost to how much you've driven, but clearly this is not correct yet, right? Clearly we are missing something. The cost is not equal to how much you drive, right? They aren't just straight up equal like this. For example, I'll show you why this is wrong. So let's say I drive 10 kilometers. So if I drive 10 kilometers, then D equals 10. And so I'll say 10 is equal to, well, what's on the left-hand side of this equation? C. So it looks like the cost is $10. Is that right? No, clearly not, right? It's only 50 cents per kilometer driven, so it would really only be half this amount, right? It would really just be $5. So this is clearly wrong, right? We need to change something about this equation to properly relate the cost of the car to how much you have driven. So what will be the I'll give you a hint here. We're going to have to add a multiplier to how much we've driven. What will the multiplier be? Well, we know that it will be half of a dollar or 50 cents per kilometers driven. So if we want the right amount of cost, then let's say let d equal 10, right? Let's say we've driven 10 kilometers, then we're going to have the cost equal to 0.5, which is our multiplier, times 10 kilometers. And then we're going to have the right amount, right? We're going to have our cost, which is now 5, and we are in dollars for our cost. So our cost would be $5, and that would be what we would expect, right? Because we only have to pay half of a dollar per kilometer driven. If we drive 10 kilometers, we only pay half of a kilometer for each of those kilometers. So we would only have $5 that we would have to pay me. Now, in the next video, I am going to add an extra step to this to make it a little bit more complicated, and I will see you then.